All right, so we definitely have to make this video. It's very, very important. You see, Jordan Peterson has been at the center of a controversy that has rocked Jordan Peterson right to his core, and Jordan Peterson is making it all of our problem. What happened is that one of the legislative bodies inside of Canada that oversees people who like to call themselves psychologists, like he does, reviewed some of his behavior, and they're like, we are going to strip you of your ability to act as a psychologist unless you stop being crazy. And that's really the basics of it. Well, he petitioned and tried to fight it, and he lost. And so in order to maintain his ability to call himself a psychologist in the country of Canada, they want him to go in for social media training. Basically, how not to sound like a lunatic and not be an absolute prick to everybody. So this is his copium show with his daughter, and we'll see how this goes.
Because one of the things the college did, which is just beyond comprehension as far as I'm concerned, is pursue these complaints that were put forward by people distributed all over the world, who then claimed in writing falsely to be my clients.
Is that true? I don't think that ever got proven. And also, it's irrelevant, ultimately, because what their complaint is not his behavior with his clients, it's his behavior on the internet. Because it's one thing if you're a regular private citizen, and even if you're a psychologist, and you say a bunch of hyperbolic, crazy, wingnutty shit. Fine. Whatever. I think you should be able to say whatever you want. But if you say the words, and he has, as a psychologist, and then you say just the most bananas shit, well, whoever licensed you to be a psychologist does bear some responsibility for that. It is their right, and I agree with it, that they have a way to put forth some sort of pressure on him. I think that's totally reasonable.
In fact, they were never my clients, and not only were they not my clients, they had nothing to do with anyone who was ever a client of mine. And so I figured at least the court would say, well, you know, of course you have the right to police professionals because you're a professional governing body, but they didn't even do that. They just basically said, well, of course you have the right to freedom of speech, except when it comes to, let's say, political opinions.
It's a lot more than just political. You have to water it down to this in order for this to make any sense. This is bananas.
So, you know, then what right do you have at all? And, you know, it's terrible, Michaela, because I know perfectly well from talking to many physicians in particular, but also lawyers and psychologists, that no one in Canada, arguably, and this is also extremely strange, it's surreal, there's no one in Canada except me that's actually in a position to fight this.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, this is your problem. This is a you problem. This is not a problem that is affecting anybody else. This is a you problem. It affects one guy. And oddly enough, what caused that one problem is that guy. One guy with one problem. Nobody else's problem. Like, what?
Because it's hyper expensive, and I don't know if my insurance will cover it. It's hyper expensive.
You are under contract with the Daily Wire. You can afford it. Don't even try and come at me with, well, I just don't know if I can afford it. Fuck off.
It's stressful. It's complex. It's time consuming.
Oh, it's going to take time away from you shit posting constantly on Twitter. Poor baby.
It could involve the suspension of my license. And there's not really anything that can be done to me that's a threat. I'm not serving as a clinician. I don't have a practice anymore because that became impossible, even though I love doing it.
You got so wildly popular. Why would you even need to see clients? Like, you can say, oh, I love to do it, but I mean, You could just do it. Just stop doing this. You could totally do that. Like, nobody has prevented Jordan Peterson from seeing his clients. He could totally do it. Like, he could do it for free. He's got so much money. Like, no, this is I am insanely rich and everything that is personal to me is the most important fucking thing in the world. Come on, man.
And I'm also not very happy about that. So I'm like,
change it. You have all the money. Change it. Stop being a whiny baby on the Daily Wire and go and help people in your clinical practice. Go do that.
Person who can do this. And Canadians have no idea to what degree professionals in Canada are now required not to say what they think or to lie outright. So
you just said you're the only person in this position. What the fuck, dude?
For example, therapists are required by law to lie about, let's say, the gender identity of minors. And so for me, especially on the therapy side, if
this is what they're talking about. When you say stupid shit like this, you are known as a psychologist, you're misrepresenting what is understood as the mainstream clinical consensus. That's what they're talking about. You can't just say shit like that because you do hold a position of power. You can say it all day as soon as you no longer identify as a psychologist. That's totally fine.
If you're required by law and by your professional organization to lie cowardly, you're done as a therapist, because the only thing you've got as a therapist is honesty. That's it. Honesty is what's curative.
You have never met a therapist. Buddy.
So, you know, it's just part of how surreal the world is, and particularly how surreal Canada.
Why hasn't she said a single thing yet? Isn't she the host? Michaela is not talented. She's not talented at all.
It's hard to fathom.
Yeah, it is hard to fathom. Can I read just a couple of sentences from the decision so people have an idea of what's in here? It's linked below. People can read the entire thing. But there's parts, like this is how it begins. When individuals join a regulated profession, they do not lose their charter right to freedom of expression.
Right.
At the same time, however, they take on obligations and must abide by the rules of their regulatory body that may limit their freedom of expression.
Right.
That's just one sentence after another. That's how it starts.
Yeah. You have a right to it, but if you're operating underneath that regulatory board, you do have limits placed upon you. If you don't want those limits, don't be underneath that regulatory board. Like, he knew that when he was becoming a psychologist. Like, he knew that. It's they make you sign a paper, okay? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, perfect. It's a great thing to highlight. You know, it's like, well, you have this fundamental right, but what? What rules? There's a rule, eh? There's a rule. Is that right? That the College of Psychologists has, that I can't criticize Justin Trudeau on Twitter.
I don't know if it's specific like that, but I'm pretty sure if you're talking about like mask mandates and because you do, or vaccine policy, which you do, I think, they can. They totally can. And the thing is, this is not a case about Canada. This is also pretty much every regulatory body. Like, all MDs in the United States have the same kind of thing. Like, this is not this one specific bad guys versus Jordan. This is a standard by which everyone in the fucking world has to be held to, and Jordan doesn't like it because it personally affects him. That's it. That's all this is.
That's a rule, is it? And if someone anywhere in the world complains about the fact that I've criticized Justin Trudeau, let's say, that all of a sudden that's a rule, even though it wasn't a rule.
It was a rule. It was always a rule. It's always been a rule. Don't you like rules? Don't you write books about rules, but you don't like other people's rules? What are you, a baby?
And of course I get to criticize Justin Trudeau, not only because he richly deserves it in every way you can possibly imagine, but because that's actually what freedom of speech means. So I have no idea what the court means by, abiding by the rules. So the rules are whatever the bloody College of Psychologists determines constitutes a rule.
Yeah, that's their job. That's literally their job.
After the fact, given their complete freedom to make manifest any rules they want.
Yes, that's his own signature on his jacket, on his bizarro Superman villain outfit. Yeah.
It's beyond comprehension. And but I have freedom of speech. It's like, do I now? What do I get to talk about?
Whatever you want.
Apparently, I can't even talk about the weather. Here's another fact. This is literally the truth. People can submit a complaint to the College of Psychologists from anywhere in the world. And so someone in the States submitted a complaint about the last conversation I had with Joe Rogan.
Okay.
Where I expressed my doubts about the validity of economic predictions based on climate science.
Yes. And as has been established before, you have been legitimately paid by anti-climate change corporations to be a propagandist. This is an open fact. People know this. Like, it wasn't even hidden. This whole thing where he's like, I read all of these books and these papers about climate and oil, and I know all of that. And then he just outright says the most anti-science shit possible. Like, it is known Khaleesi. But yeah, go ahead. Go off, King.
The complainant submitted the entire transcript, right? A 3-hour conversation as evidence of my unprofessional behavior.
Yeah.
And the college, which did not have to pursue that complaint, went forward with it.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
So, like, okay, I talked to Joe for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Apparently, everything I said in that 3 hours was unprofessional and a disgrace to the profession.
Yes. Yes. I watched the whole thing. Yes.
So, like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? The answer is, well, we're going to appeal the decision. I will take this to the Supreme Court. I don't think that
I don't think this is... I don't know how Canada's laws work, but I don't think this is really a case for the Supreme Court. I'm pretty sure what the board says is what is going to happen. Like, unless you can get some politician to try and put some political pressure on it that way. But this isn't a criminal or even a civil case. This is him up against a board. This isn't a case for the courts. This is him against the board. I mean, maybe there's some legal proceedings. I know there's some avenues for dealing with that in the United States. Maybe there are in Canada too. But again, like, he's not at risk of being arrested for this.
Judges will have either the wisdom or the courage to rule about this properly, except at the Supreme Court level. And I'm not particularly optimistic about that either.
So give up.
I'm not optimistic about that either. I don't see how you can win this without overturning colleges in general. And that's not a good look for the colleges to lose this. So won't the Supreme Court, I know they're not supposed to be pressured, but
I swear to God, Michaela is like a fucking robot. Like, I'm not trying to like talk ill about her looks or anything, but like, her face doesn't fucking move. Her face does not move. It's really weird.
Won't they? What's the benefit for them for ruling in your favor, other than
the
withholding
benefit
freedom
would be
of
that
speech?
they support. Well, they would support the most fundamental principle of a free society, right? It's like, why do you have the right to freedom of speech? Well, the answer is because there's no difference between free speech and thinking, no difference between free speech and dialogue, and no difference between free speech and problem solving and negotiation. And so...
Oh, what the fuck does it have to do with anything? Whatever. Please explain.
And therefore peace. If you eliminate that, people can no longer think, they can no longer adapt, they can no longer negotiate, they no longer even know how to orient themselves in the world.
Nobody is taking away freedom of speech, Jordan. Nobody's taking away your freedom of speech. It's taking away the privilege to be identified as a psychologist, you can still say whatever you want. You just won't have that extra privilege on top of it because you don't deserve it. Sorry. It's consequences of your behavior, but nobody's taking your freedom of speech, buddy.
And so, in principle, the advantage for the Supreme...
Yeah. Where's the right to be a psychologist? Yeah. Is that enshrined in the Canadian Constitution?
Supreme Court is that they rule in favor of the most fundamental principle upon which civil democracy itself is predicated.
Uh-huh.
Now, I don't think we have the right to free speech in Canada. I think this decision today demonstrates that obviously. I saw the same thing with the Law Society in Canada. Partly was why I'm not surprised at this ruling.
If someone wants Jordan as their psychologist, who are you to tell them they can't? Me? I'm not the one in charge of the fucking board. That's not me. That ain't me, baby. That's the board. Like, it's not my fucking problem. You could ask the question of like, well, if you were on the board, would you take away his licensing as a psychologist? You could ask me that question if you want.
I've been through this before, and I see that Canada's walked down that idiot path for at least 30 years. So
why should the board have any power whatsoever in law? This isn't about law. No laws have been broken and no laws are being infringed. Yeah. Like, there's no law has been broken and no laws have been infringed. No rights are being trampled on. If you sign up and you become a psychologist under the Canadian board, you sign a document saying that you have to represent the board and thus the profession professionally. And if not, they can censor you. Now, nobody forces you to sign that paperwork. Nobody forces you to choose that career path. Nobody does. You choose to. And you willingly go into this bargain understanding that that is an expectation of the job. And that if you can't perform that job the way that your bosses say you should, you can be fired. That's what this is. None of it has anything to do with freedom of speech. None of it has anything to do with the law. My question is, if somebody wants to be a psychologist, why do they have to go to any board? Because that's how it's done. That's how it's done with doctors, psychologists, basically anything that's going to be providing some form of mental, physical health, there's always an advisory board, and there are very good reasons for that. Very, 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 very good reasons. It requires certification, right? And like, why is that how it's done? Oh, easy. Because if you don't have a regulatory board, you'll have people like, doing bleeding. Oh, I have the flu. Well, we got to bleed you. Let's get some leeches. Or, hey, how about those, the bleach drinkers, Yeah, you have cancer? Chug this bleach and let's pull all your fucking teeth out. Or, hey, in psychology, maybe prescribing to some wackadoodle ideas. Electroshock therapy. Well, we still do EEGs. But like any number of barbaric and inhumane cult-like brainwashing techniques that have been developed for years and years and years. These boards exist to analyze incoming data, to do meta-studies, to communicate across vast stretches of distances, to maintain the best standards and practices. That's why it's made up of a group of people with many subgroups underneath them in order to inform the absolute best case scenario. These people are the experts. Now, are they perfect? No, they're not perfect. They never are. But is there a reason they exist? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, you can disagree with their decision in this, but it really does come down to the simple fact of that's the boss. That's corporate. And they dictate how the business is run. And if you want to act a fool, they can remove your job title from you. Like, it's your choice. Like, nobody is stifling Jordan here. He already admits he doesn't see clients anymore. He does not act as a psychologist in any way whatsoever now. He's just making this like a big issue because it's a great way to grift for attention and money. So
our country is in, well, this is where I start to get doubtful. It's like either I'm wrong or the country is in trouble. Now, to tell you the truth, I would rather be wrong.
Uh-huh.
But I've thought it through. It's like, okay, what did I do exactly? None of my clients complain.
It's only boss because government has made them boss. You wouldn't have to go to a board if the government didn't force you to. Yes, correct. That's right. That's correct. That is 100% correct. And it's good that we do have boards. It's good. Because as I have already explained, like, without them, you can have people abusing the systems and hurting people. I know of a lot of them. I've done videos on a lot of people who have lost their licenses because they were fucking hurting people. Like, these are good things. Deregulating medicine is a terrible idea. Horrible idea. Somebody over in the YouTube chat said the critical debriefing therapy they did after 9/11 was clinically proven to make PTSD worse. There's so many examples of psychology run rampant. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. There are so many examples where people abuse their position of power and then they have their ability to act as that stripped by a board, and it was the right decision. Rarely have I ever seen a situation, I think one, where somebody got stripped from a position and it didn't really seem reasonable. Only once, but I can, like, numerous, probably well over 25 instances of the board acting exactly how it should. It is what it is.
That has nothing to do with this. And I expressed my political opinions, which I have a right to do, which I believe were correct. I think that, and Canadians agree with this now. The last poll indicated that Canadians believe that Justin Trudeau is the worst prime minister we've ever had. Well, that was sort of my point a year ago. You know? And so if I can't say that, and yet a majority of Canadians believe it to be true, and believe me, a lot more of them are going to believe that.
Sure, I guess. Whatever. You're weird backwards country. Just kidding, Canadians. I love you.
A lot more are going to believe that in the relatively near future. In what sense do I have anything even approximating freedom of speech? And if...
Yeah.
Because you can still say anything you want. You're not going to be imprisoned or jailed for it. You could say whatever you want, Jordan. Nobody's stopping you.
I can't have that opinion, and therefore, in principle, no one can.
You can.
Then what do we...
You can totally have that opinion. You can say that opinion. Anybody can. But if you do, they might take away your psychology license. Sorry, that's just what it is. Consequences. What the fuck?
We do when we're stuck with a prime minister, let's say, who everyone has decided is the worst prime minister the country's ever had.
Look, I'm going to be dead ass honest with you here. The simple fact that that woman took that man to Eastern Europe to a dodgy clinic so that he could be put into a medically induced coma so he didn't have to deal with the pain and the agony of withdrawal symptoms from drug abuse. And while he's in a fucking coma for 6 weeks, she runs off with Cobra fucking Tate and gets dicked down in a bunch of Romanian nightclubs, only for him to come out with brain damage and trying to spout off all this dog shit is why he should not have a license to be a psychologist. That's why. I don't care what he says on Twitter. Like, he should have been stripped of it a long time ago. This is somebody who has a position of privilege where he can advise people to make decisions based on their health and their mental well-being. And he chose one of the most dog shit, insane, dangerous, like brain damage, dangerous techniques to get over an addiction, something he knows a lot about, being a psychologist, at the behest of his water-brained fuckhead idiot daughter. He has no business being a psychologist well before we get into his criticisms of Justin Trudeau. So, no, dude, fuck that. Fuck that. Like, nah. Homeboy should have lost a long time ago. I honestly, this crying and copium just gives me life.